The fire was a living thing, roaring, snapping, devouring the house like it had a hunger. Inside, the walls were alive with heat, the air thick with smoke. Amid the chaos, a man stood frozen in the doorway, eyes wide, heart pounding. His dog, a golden retriever named Max, was trapped upstairs. The man's mind raced. He couldn't hear Max's bark over the crackling flames, but he knew his friend was there somewhere waiting. Without thinking, he dashed into the inferno, each step a gamble against fate. He found Max in the hallway, eyes wide with fear, tail wagging weakly. The man scooped him up, cradling him close, and together they stumbled toward the exit. As they emerged into the night, the house behind them collapsed, a final breath of destruction. They were safe, but the journey was just beginning. The smoke clung to Alex's lungs, a bitter, choking reminder that he was risking everything for one trembling life. Each step he took was measured against the crackle of falling beams and the roar of fire devouring his home. The heat pressed against him like an invisible hand, forcing sweat to bead along his forehead and run down the back of his neck. He coughed, choking on ash, and his eyes stung, but the thought of Max alone in the darkness pushed him forward. Memories flickered behind his eyelids. Every morning Max greeted him at the door, tail wagging in uncontainable joy, eyes glinting with love that had no conditions. That image burned brighter than the flames themselves. The staircase loomed ahead, warped and threatening to collapse under the inferno's weight. Alex's hands trembled as he reached for the railing, each step a negotiation with gravity and fate. The smoke was thickest here, turning the world into a gray blur, and the fire's crackle seemed to speak, mocking him with the urgency of his own panic. Then he heard it, a faint, frightened whimper. Max. The sound stabbed through the chaos, slicing through the smoke and heat, pulling him upward with renewed determination. He reached the hallway where Max was trapped. The dog was crouched low, tail tucked, fur singed at the edges, his eyes wide and glistening with fear. Met Alex's. A moment of recognition passed between them, silent but profound, an unspoken promise that they would survive this together. Alex dropped to his knees, arms trembling as he gathered Max into his chest. The warmth of the dog against his own scorched and sweat-slicked body was grounding, a tether to the world outside the chaos. Behind them, the fire hissed, sending sparks up like fireflies in a nightmare sky. Each beam that fell made the floor vibrate beneath Alex's feet, each step a question of whether they would make it. The hallway seemed endless, the smoke a suffocating blanket that threatened to steal his sight and his breath. Yet Alex focused on the feel of Max's heartbeat against his chest, slow and frightened, and let it guide him. One careful step after another, he retraced the path he had taken in so much fear, eyes fixed on the faint light spilling through the front door. Finally, the doorway appeared, a small slice of night sky beyond the inferno. With a final surge of effort, Alex pushed forward, stumbling out into the cool evening air. The sudden chill was like a shock, a baptism in relief and gratitude. He dropped to his knees in the grass, coughing, chest heaving, holding Max tight. The dog pressed against him, shivering from smoke and fear, but alive. Behind them, the house surrendered completely to the fire, flames consuming walls and roof, leaving nothing but ash and smoke curling into the black sky. Alex felt a strange, hollow victory. They were alive, yes, but the weight of what they had lost pressed down with equal force. The home where so many memories had been made, the quiet evenings and laughter, now reduced to ember. He stroked Max's fur, whispered reassurances he wasn't sure he even believed, and let the night air cool the fire inside him. This night had changed everything. He had saved Max, but he knew the journey was far from over. They would need to find a new home, a new rhythm, a new way to be. And somehow, despite the destruction, despite the terror, Alex felt a fragile glimmer of hope. In the distance, the wail of sirens approached, a reminder that life carried on beyond this fire. Alex glanced at Max's eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight, and knew one thing with absolute clarity. They were no longer just man and dog. They were survivors, partners forged in fire, bonded by fear and love. And nothing, not flames, not loss, not the uncertainties ahead, could undo that. The day after the fire, The world felt muted, as if the inferno had sucked color and warmth from everything it touched. Alex sat on a borrowed couch in his friend's cramped living room. Max curled into a trembling ball at his feet. The dog's golden fur, once vibrant, now smelled faintly of smoke, singed and unkempt, and each small movement carried the tremor of fear. Alex ran his fingers through it anyway, anchoring himself in the physical proof that Max was still alive. He had saved him, yes, but saving him had not erased the memory of the flames, the heat, or the way Max's eyes had widened in terror. Outside, the neighborhood carried on as if nothing had happened. Birds sang, cars passed, and the sun traced its path across the sky. But inside Alex's mind, the world had shifted irrevocably. He couldn't stop replaying the fire, the house collapsing, the deafening roar that had nearly swallowed them whole. Max whimpered, and Alex flinched at the sound, heart hammering, until he realized it was just a shadow flickering across the room. Shadows became threats. Ordinary noises transformed into alarms. He looked down at Max, who had lifted his head, ears perked, as though sharing the same anxiety. They were trapped together in the residue of trauma, each reflecting the other's fear. The days blurred. Friends brought meals, offered a spare bedroom, and tried to infuse some normalcy. But Alex felt untethered. He wandered through the remnants of what was left, scrolling through photos of the house on his phone, each image now a painful reminder of what had been lost. Max refused to sleep alone, curling against Alex's legs at night, whimpering when he stirred, reacting to every creak of the house and distant shout in the street. Alex would sit awake for hours, tracing the dog's anxious movements with his hands, whispering promises he wasn't entirely sure he could keep. Yet amid the despair, small moments of quiet resilience appeared. A weak tail wag in the morning, Max resting his head on Alex's knee, breathing slowly, a shared laugh at a familiar memory, suddenly poignant and bittersweet. Alex began taking walks with Max, just around the block at first, letting the night air cool the burns still smoldering in his chest. He would notice the smell of wet grass after rain, the crunch of leaves underfoot, and let it remind him that the world still existed outside the ash and rubble. In these walks, they began to find a rhythm. Alex spoke to Max, even when he knew the dog couldn't answer, narrating their surroundings, explaining the absence of their home, apologizing for what could not be undone. Max would tilt his head, ears alert, eyes tracking every sound as if absorbing every word. Alex found that speaking the truth, no matter how painful, anchored him more than he expected. They were alive, yes, but they were fragile, and the weight of survival pressed on both of them in ways neither could articulate. By nightfall, Alex would watch Max sleep, twitching in dreams that surely carried fragments of the fire, and feel a blend of gratitude and grief that twisted in his chest. The flames had taken a home, but they had left light. That fragile thread of hope, the proof that love had endured through smoke and terror, became the first spark of their rebuilding. They would heal, slowly, awkwardly, painfully, but together. In the echo of ashes, they began to understand that survival was not a destination but a journey, and every trembling paw step toward normalcy mattered. Even as they clung to each other for solace, Alex felt the first pangs of a new awareness. The fire had taken more than walls and furniture. It had burned away illusions of safety. But in that absence, a space opened for resilience, for bond, for the quiet revelation that some ties like the one he shared with Max were indestructible. And so, amidst the gray haze of loss, they began inch by inch to step forward, the echoes of the inferno still whispering, but no longer in command. The early morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting long, narrow stripes across the floor. Alex lay awake on the couch, listening to Max's slow, rhythmic breathing beside him. The nights were still uneasy. Louder sounds triggered flinches. Shadows became monsters. But in the quiet moments like this, a fragile sense of peace began to creep in. Alex rubbed the dog's head, feeling the warmth of his fur and the steady heartbeat beneath his palm, and allowed himself to imagine a day without panic, without the constant weight of the fire's memory. Recovery was uneven. Some days Max bounded through the park with a joyous abandon that made Alex laugh for the first time in weeks. Other days, a distant siren, or a stray flicker of firelight in a neighbor's window, sent him cowering, tail tucked, trembling against Alex's legs. Alex, in turn, struggled with guilt. He questioned every decision he had made that night, replaying the moments he might have done more, faster, differently. Therapy sessions became a lifeline, spaces where he could voice his fears and regrets aloud without judgment. Max attended too, sitting beside him in the office, a silent, grounding presence. The dog's calm gaze reminded Alex that survival was not about perfection. It was about presence, about showing up even when the world felt unmanageable. They began to venture farther, taking long walks in the early evening, when the world seemed gentler. Leaves rustled underfoot, the scent of damp earth filled their senses, and Max sniffed and explored, tail wagging slowly but surely. Alex noticed the subtle changes. Max's ears perked with curiosity again. His body relaxed and he would chase after squirrels or butterflies without hesitation. In these moments, Alex felt a flicker of something he had feared lost forever. It was fragile and tentative, like sunlight filtering through smoke, but it was real. Gradually, Alex found himself reconnecting with people, sharing their story with neighbors, friends, and fellow survivors. Each conversation chipped away at the isolation the fire had imposed. He joined a local support group, where strangers became confidants, sharing tales of loss and survival that resonated deep within him. Hearing their voices, he realized that his experience, though uniquely harrowing, was part of a larger tapestry of resilience. Max, always at his side, became a source of comfort, not only for Alex, but for others in the group. His gentle presence, soothing the anxious and frightened. Healing also manifested in small, intimate ritual. Alex would sit on the porch in the evenings, Max at his feet, and watch the horizon bleed colors into the sky. They began cooking together again, Alex humming softly while Max sat nearby, eyes bright, tail wagging with anticipation for scraps and attention alike. Even the simple act of tidying a room or watering a plant became symbolic. Small victories in the reclamation of life and routine. Each success, no matter how minor, reminded Alex that trauma, though powerful, did not define them. Setbacks, of course, were inevitable. Max's nightmares persisted intermittently, leaving him panting and restless, while Alex would awaken with a start, heart hammering, unsure whether the danger was real or remembered. But these moments became opportunities for connection, for reassurance, Alex learned to sit quietly with Max, speaking in calm tones, stroking him until the tremors subsided. And each time they weathered these episodes together, the bond between them deepened, a tether of resilience forged in shared vulnerability. By the end of these months, Alex began to notice a profound truth. Survival was not merely about escaping the fire. It was about carrying its lessons forward, without being consumed by them. He had learned to pause, to notice the subtleties of life around him, to treasure fleeting joys and small comforts. And Max, once broken by fear, had regained his curiosity and playfulness, a living testament to the possibility of healing. Their shared journey was far from over, but for the first time, Alex felt a quiet confidence that they would navigate whatever came next, together. The cottage sat at the edge of town, a quiet place framed by towering oaks, whose leaves whispered in the wind. Alex had stumbled upon it during a seemingly aimless drive, and the moment he stepped inside, a fragile hope sparked. It was modest, with peeling paint on the windowsills, and a small garden overrun by weeds, but it had a heartbeat, walls that could hold memories, floors that could echo laughter, windows that could let in sunlight instead of smoke. Max padded alongside him, sniffing every corner, tail wagging slowly, tentatively curious. Alex smiled, feeling the tension in his shoulders loosen for the first time in months. They settled into routines that felt both ordinary and miraculous. Mornings began with sunlight streaming through the windows. Max stretched lazily in his favorite spot by the garden-facing window while Alex brewed coffee, inhaling the scent of fresh grounds and dew-damp earth. They walked the winding paths through the nearby woods, Max bounding ahead occasionally before circling back, eyes bright and playful. Alex found joy in these ordinary rhythms, the way Max's ears twitched at birdsong, the warmth of his fur against Alex's leg, the way sunlight dappled the floor in shifting patterns. Each day the cottage felt less like a shelter, and more like a home. The garden became their sanctuary. Alex knelt in the dirt, planting flowers and vegetables, feeling the soil crumble between his fingers, grounding him in life and growth. Max dug beside him, scattering seeds unintentionally,
ears flopping with enthusiasm, eyes gleaming with curiosity. Together they coaxed life from the earth, a quiet rebellion against the destruction they had endured. The act of nurturing something fragile and growing reminded Alex that they were capable of renewal, that loss did not preclude joy. Inside the cottage, Alex filled the walls with memories, photographs of friends, sketches of Max in playful poses, small tokens of life reclaimed. The scent of home-cooked meals filled the air, bread baking in the oven, soup simmering on the stove, Max's nose twitching with every aroma. These details became anchors, subtle affirmations that they could thrive again, that the fire's shadow would not dictate their lives forever.
Evenings were a quiet ritual. Alex and Max would sit on the porch, shoulders brushing, watching the sky shift from amber to rose to indigo. Conversations weren't necessary. The shared silence carried all the weight and comfort they needed. Max would lean into Alex, pressing his head against his leg, and Alex would run his hand over his back, feeling the steady pulse of life, the resilience that had survived fire and fear. It was in these small, intimate moments that Alex realized the depth of their bond. Scarred, yes, but unbroken. Socially, Alex began tentatively stepping out into the world again. He found a new job that allowed him flexibility, giving him the freedom to be present for Max while pursuing purpose and independence. He reconnected with friends, sharing laughter and stories, testing the waters of trust that had been scorched by the fire. And Max, once tentative and anxious, greeted neighbors with a wagging tail and curious eyes, a living testament to recovery and the ability to feel safe again. Months passed, and the cottage began to breathe with life. Paintings adorned the walls, plants thrived in sunlight, and the faint hum of routine became a balm for their frayed nerves. Alex noticed the shift in himself, the anxiety that had once gripped his chest now loosened, replaced by a quiet vigilance, a mindfulness that allowed him to treasure the present. Max's transformation mirrored his own. The tremors of fear gave way to leaps of joy, playful barks, and contented sighs. In this new beginning, Alex understood that survival was not just about having escaped the fire, it was about claiming life after it. They had endured, yes, but now they were thriving. Every day was an affirmation that love, resilience, and hope could endure even the fiercest flame. And in the quiet, golden light of late afternoon, Alex glanced at Max, saw the spark of life in his eyes, and realized that they were no longer simply surviving. They were home, together, stronger for everything they had faced. Years had passed since that night of fire and terror, yet Alex could still feel its echo in the marrow of his bones. He and Max had grown older together, Alex's hair flecked with silver, Max's muzzle softening to gray, but the bond that had been forged in flames remained unshakable. They sat on the porch of the cottage, the same cottage that had once seemed small and fragile, now transformed into a home brimming with memory. The garden bloomed riotously, colors spilling across the yard like a living canvas, and the oaks whispered overhead, leaves catching the late afternoon sun. Life, Alex realized, had reclaimed them fully. Max rested his head on Alex's knee, eyelids heavy, tail thumping faintly against the wooden porch. Alex stroked his fur gently, remembering the night he had pulled him from the inferno. The memory was sharp, visceral, the heat, the smoke, the terror, but it no longer burned with panic. Instead, it throbbed with gratitude, awe, and the quiet pride of survival. Max had been a fragile, trembling creature that night, and now he was strong, calm, and wise in his own canine way. Watching him breathe evenly in the warm glow of evening, Alex understood that some bonds transcend fear, time, and loss. The air was scented with earth and flowers, a soft reminder of growth and renewal. Birds sang in the trees and a gentle breeze carried the faint hum of distant life. The laughter of children playing down the lane, the rhythmic tapping of a neighbor tending to chores. Alex let the sensory richness fill him, each detail grounding him in a reality that had once seemed impossible. Life had returned, not perfectly, but fully messy, beautiful, and enduring. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, Alex reflected on the long journey from fire to this moment. He had faced panic, helplessness, and guilt, yet those trials had also revealed resilience, love, and courage he hadn't known he possessed. He had saved Max, yes, but Max had saved him in return, teaching him patience, trust, and the quiet strength of presence. They had healed together, step by tentative step, forging a life richer and deeper for the trials they had endured. The cottage seemed to sigh around them, as though acknowledging the journey, bearing witness to the quiet victories that had accrued over years of care, tenderness, and vigilance. Alex smiled, feeling the weight of time settle comfortably on his shoulders. He leaned back in his chair, Max's head still resting against his knee, and allowed himself to simply breathe, to savor the silence, to be fully present. A shooting star streaked across the twilight sky, a sudden burst of light against the darkening canvas. Alex thought of that night, the roar of fire, the panic, the leap into smoke and heat to save a beloved companion, and realized that the star was more than a coincidence. It was a symbol, a punctuation mark on a story of survival, a reminder that even in darkness, brilliance could emerge. He whispered, almost instinctively, "We made it, bud." Max lifted his head just slightly, eyes meeting his with the quiet understanding only a soul that has endured together can hold. They stayed like that for a long while, sun fully set now, the first stars of night peeking through the velvety sky. Alex felt a profound peace he hadn't known was possible in the aftermath of trauma. The fire that had once threatened to consume everything had instead led them to a life of depth, of connection, of enduring love. The scars remained, subtle and unseen, but they were no longer wounds. They were testaments, proof of survival and resilience. Finally, as the night air cooled and the crickets sang their gentle chorus, Alex rose and stretched, Max following his every movement with languid curiosity. They walked to the edge of the porch together, shoulders brushing, side by side as they had always been. Alex looked out over the garden, the trees, the quiet town beyond, and understood that their journey, once defined by fear and uncertainty, had come full circle. Max yawned, settling into the grass beside Alex, his body relaxed and trusting. Alex knelt to stroke him one last time before standing, heart swelling with gratitude. Together they had faced fire, despair and loss, and emerged into light, into life, into a world that had reclaimed them. The man and the dog who had been bound by terror were now bound by something far greater, unwavering love, shared history, and the quiet certainty that no matter what storms might come, they would face them together. And in that final moment, under the vast star-filled sky, the story of survival, healing, and enduring companionship reached its peaceful, poetic conclusion. The fire was a living thing, roaring, snapping, devouring the house like it had a hunger. Inside, the walls trembled with heat, the air thick and suffocating, and every inhalation carried the bitter tang of smoke that clawed at Alex's lungs. He stood frozen at the doorway, eyes wide, heart hammering, as he called Max, his golden retriever, through the hay. The dog's bark, faint and desperate, sliced through the roar of the inferno. Alex's mind raced, but thought fled the moment his feet carried him into the blaze. Each step was a gamble against fate. Beams above groaned, and sparks danced around him like tiny angry fireflies. When he found Max crouched low, tail tucked, eyes wide with fear, a surge of relief and terror collided in his chest. Cradling Max against him, Alex stumbled back through the smoke, guided only by the slivers of moonlight spilling through the doorway. They emerged into the cool night, coughing, shaking, alive. Behind them the house surrendered to flames, and the world had narrowed to the two of them, a man and his dog, bound together by survival. In the days that followed, the world outside their borrowed walls continued as if nothing had happened. But for Alex and Max, life existed in a fragile bubble of ash and echo. The house was gone, reduced to a smoldering skeleton, memories twisted into smoke and dust. Max refused to sleep alone, curling against Alex's legs at night, whimpering at shadows that reminded him of the inferno. Alex too felt the lingering heat of panic in his chest whenever he closed his eyes, his mind replaying the fire in relentless loop. Each crackle of a distant flame or unexpected noise sent both of them into tremors, a dance of anxiety that mirrored and amplified their shared trauma. Yet amid the grief, there were moments of delicate tenderness. Max resting his head against Alex's knee, their hands brushing over fur, the faintest wag of a tail at dawn, small flickers of life and reassurance in a world that felt irreparably changed. They began walking together, first around the block, then through quiet streets lined with oak and maple, allowing the cool night air to wash the smoke from their lungs and the weight from their mind. Alex spoke aloud to Max, narrating the world in a gentle, rhythmic cadence, reassuring both dog and self that the world still held beauty, still
still held possibility. Each shared step became a ritual, a quiet rebellion against fear. Max's ears twitched at the rustle of leaves, his eyes alert, curious. Alex noticed the subtle returns of his old friend, the spark of interest in his gaze, the tentative wag of his tail. These small gestures carried immense weight, proof that life could return even after destruction. Recovery was uneven. Some days Max would run freely, chasing the shadows of birds and butterflies with joyful abandon, and Alex would laugh, a sound he had almost forgotten. Other days, a siren, a sudden flare of light, or a stray spark of memory would send Max cowering, trembling against Alex's legs, eyes wide with a terror Alex knew all too well. Alex sought therapy, both for himself and with Max in tow, learning to navigate the intricate landscape of trauma. Support groups introduced him to strangers, whose shared experiences of fear, loss and survival became unexpected anchors. Max, lying quietly beside him in these rooms, exuded a calming presence that soothed more than one anxious human heart. Slowly, imperceptibly, their confidence returned. Max began playing again, barking softly at squirrels, and Alex began to sleep more deeply, feeling the steady rhythm of life return. Months passed, and eventually they found a new home, a modest cottage on the outskirts of town, framed by oaks that whispered in the breeze, and a garden that had grown wild in quiet rebellion. The walls smelled faintly of damp wood and earth, but to Alex it smelled like possibility. They transformed it together. Flowers were planted, vegetables coaxed from stubborn soil, walls painted, and windows cleaned until light could spill across every room. Max found a favorite spot by the garden-facing window, sunlight warming his fur, while Alex settled into routines that made the cottage feel like a sanctuary rather than a shelter. Morning coffee on the porch, evenings walking the winding paths through the woods, quiet nights sharing silence in the living room, each act a reclamation of life, a victory over the terror that had once consumed them. In these days of ordinary miracles, Alex rediscovered joy. Max would chase fallen leaves with a clumsy delight, ears flopping, tail wagging. Alex hummed quietly while tending the garden or preparing meals, the scents of bread baking and vegetables roasting infusing the cottage with warmth. Shadows were no longer threats but companions, light and dark dancing together across the walls. The act of caring for the cottage, for Max, for the fragile new life they were building, became their therapy. Each gesture, small and intimate, stitched their lives back together thread by thread, a tapestry stronger for its scars. Years slipped by with the quiet insistence of continuity. Alex and Max aged together, their bodies marked by time, but hearts intertwined in a bond unbroken. Max's muzzle grayed, but his eyes still held the light that had once guided Alex through the fire. Alex too bore the silver of experience, the quiet wisdom of survival etched into his face and posture. They sat together on the porch one evening, the garden a riot of colors in the fading light, and the air thick with the scent of earth and flowers. Alex stroked Max's fur, feeling the steady pulse of life, the resilience that had endured. Memories of the inferno flickered briefly, not as terror, but as a reminder of how far they had come. Under a sky painted with the hues of sunset, Alex whispered to Max, "We made it, buddy." Max's eyes met his, understanding and patient, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had shared. A shooting star streaked across the horizon, a final punctuation mark on years of survival and healing, a reminder that light could always emerge from darkness. The fire had taken much, but it had not taken. They had endured, together, and in doing so, had discovered a life richer than they could have imagined, a life threaded with love, resilience, and the quiet certainty that whatever the world might throw at them, they would face it side by side. As the stars glimmered above and the crickets began their nightly song, Alex and Max remained on the porch, bodies close, hearts full. The scars of the past were present but no longer burdens. They were proof, subtle and unspoken, of endurance and hope. And in the gentle darkness, with the wind whispering through the oaks, Alex felt a profound peace. Life had returned, they had survived, and they had learned, above all, that true companionship, the kind forged in fire and fear, was unbreakable. The night had deepened, stars scattered like fragile embers across the sky. Alex leaned back on the porch, Max resting his head in Alex's lap, eyes half closed but alert, breathing steady and warm. The fire that had once stolen their home, their safety, now felt like a distant ghost, replaced by the quiet pulse of life and love that remained. The garden thrived, the cottage breathed, and even the oaks overhead seemed to hum with resilience. Alex traced a hand along Max's fur, feeling the soft warmth and steady heartbeat beneath. He thought of that terrifying night, of the smoke, the flames, the fear that had threatened to consume them both. And yet here they were, alive, whole and bound together in a way nothing could undo. He whispered softly, "We made it, buddy. We really made it." Max lifted his head just slightly, eyes glinting in the moonlight, as if acknowledging the weight of that truth. For the first time in a long while, Alex allowed himself to simply breathe, to sit in the serenity of the night, and to marvel at the small, miraculous constancy of love. He realized that the fire had not been the end of their story. It had been the crucible that forged every scar, every tremor, every anxious step had led them to this moment. A life reclaimed, a bond unbreakable, and a hope that burned brighter than any flame. As the stars glimmered overhead and the crickets sang their gentle chorus, Alex and Max sat together in silence. No words were needed. They had faced fear, embraced recovery, and discovered something far greater than survival. They had found home in each other. And under that vast, forgiving sky, with the cool night air wrapping around them, a story settled into quiet eternity. A man, a dog, and the enduring, unspoken promise that whatever came next, they would face it together.